The problems that sparked the Civil War started right when the country started. The three main problems of the Civil War were slavery, states' rights, and taxation. The South produced cotton that they would then ship off to English cotton mills, and then ships would return with goods that were also produced in the North, but were cheaper. Until the North passed a bill that raised taxes on anything imported from Europe, making it so the South had to buy from the North. Also, they disagreed about states' rights. The South felt like the North was passing laws geared against the South. So the South said that they should be able to nullify any laws that they did not agree with. And if a state wanted to secede from the Union, then they should be able to do so. There was also the issue of slavery. The entire South's economy relied solely on slave labor, where the North viewed the idea of slavery as unacceptable and morally wrong. So the tensions between the North and the South were very high. Meanwhile, in the Union state of Minnesota, business is booming. Its location on the Mississippi River and its lush forests makes it perfect for logging. Also, its rich soil is perfect for farming. We elect our second governor, Governor Alexander Ramsey, who hears that President Lincoln is calling for 75,000 men to join the Union Army. So Ramsey writes on a piece of paper that Minnesota will give 1,000 men, then immediately sends that piece of paper off to Lincoln. The big event that started the recruitment of the 1st Minnesota was the attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina on April 12, 1861. Back in Minnesota, that created outrage. For the sake of patriotism and for the sake of the pioneer spirit, men started signing up to fight for the Union. Depending on where you go in Minnesota, you will get a different answer of who was the first to sign up. It was either Josias King or Aaron Greenwald. If you go to Ramsey County, they will say that it is Aaron Greenwald. If you go to Anoka County, they'll say it is Josias King. 1,000 some men from Minnesota signed up for the Civil War, thinking they would only be in it for a couple months. So they began their training at Fort Snelling, where they were forced to drill whenever they had a spare moment of time. Many soldiers complained, but it made them the best soldiers in the Civil War. After their training, they went out east. After a stop in Chicago, a newspaper wrote, "There are few regiments we have to compare in brawn and muscle with these Minnesotans, used to the axe, the rifle, the oar, the setting pole. They're unquestionably the finest body of troops that has yet to appear on our streets." They fought their first battle of Bull Run on July 21st, 1861. Where they sustained heavy losses, going to the Battle of Gettysburg with only around 200 men. After Bull Run was when they found out that they would be in the Civil War for 3 years or even longer. As a result, many quit, but those who stayed fought in battles such as Antietam and Fredericksburg. As an attempt to ease the siege on Vicksburg, Mississippi, General Robert E. Lee, commander of the South, marched his troops north to Gettysburg. The 1st Minnesota joined the battle at Gettysburg on the second day of fighting. At Gettysburg, the 1st Minnesota was put in reserve because of their reputation as such good fighters. They were behind the main Union line, guarding the artillery battery. Meanwhile, General Daniel Sickles disobeys orders and pulls his men out of the Union line to get behind the rebels' line. As a result, it leaves a 500-yard gap in the Union line. So General Winfield Scott Hancock, commander of the Potomac Army, rides up to General Colville, the commander of the 1st Minnesota, asking, "What regiment is this?" Hearing that it was the 1st Minnesota, Hancock points to the rebels' flag, says, "See those colors? Go take them." The 1st Minnesota only had 200 men. There was no way they could plug the 500-yard gap. So the 1st Minnesota charges out, crosses over 200 yards of land, bayonets drawn. The 1st Minnesota charges, with odds stacked against them 5-1. At the end of the fighting, Minnesota went from 200 men down to only around 47. But what was left of the 1st Minnesota still went back to the field and carried back some of their wounded comrades. The 1st Minnesota was formed after the attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. That started the Civil War. On July 1st, 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg started in Pennsylvania. It lasted 3 days. On the 2nd day, General Daniel Sickles moves his troops away from the Union line to get behind the rebels' line. They left a 500-yard gap, so the 1st Minnesota charged at the rebels' line. It was a suicide charge, and all the men knew it. It was a turning point because if the 1st Minnesota would not have charged, the rebels would have charged up, destroyed the Union line, and won the Battle of Gettysburg. And they could march anywhere they wanted because General Meade was down in Vicksburg in Mississippi, and they would have been able to win the Civil War. Because of the 1st Minnesota's charge at Plum Run, that held the Union line for the 2nd day of fighting. That forced the rebels on the 3rd and last day to do the famous Pickett's Charge. Pickett's Charge was the last push to win the Civil War, and both sides knew that if the South won the Battle of Gettysburg, they would win the war. Pickett's Charge started when the Confederate artillery barrage against the Potomac Army tried to cause the army to break apart. After a while of firing, they knew that they had to conserve ammo to support the infantry charge. So before General Robert E. Lee consulted with his commander, General Longstreet, Longstreet said they should attack the Union flank, but Lee said that that's what the Union would be expecting. So Lee said they would charge the middle, which would prove to be a big mistake later. With the artillery ammo running low, the South had to charge. So Pickett's 2 divisions marches out about a mile to the Union line with the words, "Remember, men, that today you are from old Virginia." As they got close, they started to take Union artillery fire. They had to climb a fence, and that is where all hell broke loose. They came under both heavy artillery fire and heavy musket fire. At the end of fighting, both divisions were destroyed. After the slaughter, the South knew that they had lost. If the 1st Minnesota would not have charged, then the Confederates would have gone through the 500-yard gap. They would have destroyed the entire Union line, and they would have won the Battle of Gettysburg. With the momentum of winning a crucial battle like this, and being up north so far, there was nothing that could stop them from winning the Civil War. If the South would have won the Civil War, there would be major repercussions. The biggest one would be that the United States of America would not exist. What would happen is the North and the South would break apart. Great Britain would reinvade and take back both the North and the South. And we would not gain our independence till much later, and both the North and the South would not be able to defend themselves in major wars like both world wars, and the one Iraq war that we are in right today. And there would be no way we would have enough money to make the Louisiana Purchase. So except for Texas and Kansas, any state west of the Mississippi River would be French territory. Texas would have left the South and became its own country, and the United States would not be the big political and major world power that it is today.